hundreds of thousands of teenagers receiving their GCSE results this morning. Your message to those who don't receive the increasingly attainable higher grades?
Well, my message to those young people is there are lots of options available. There's a helpline, the National Careers Service helpline, for them to ring and to find out and get advice for what to do next. But there are a lot of options for those that don't get the grades to go on to do A-levels or T-levels. There are all kinds of different vocational qualifications, apprenticeships that young people can consider. They can retake those GCSEs, of course, if they wish to as well. There's an autumn series. They can retake those exams in the autumn if they wish to take them. And, of course, there's an appeal process for young people who feel that they've not been given the right grade. But today we should be congratulating those hundreds of thousands of young people who have achieved so much in very trying and difficult circumstances over the last 18 months. And we should be paying tribute to all those young people for what they've achieved. It's the culmination of not just 2 years of the GCSE course, but 11 years of school education. So congratulations to everyone who's receiving their grades today to enable them to go on to the next phase of their education, whether that's T-levels or A-levels or an apprenticeship. And also thank you to the teachers who've done a magnificent job in administering the teacher-assessed grade system with all the advice and guidance that they've had from the exam boards and the evidence that that they have compiled to determine the grades that are being awarded today.
OK. Well, given what we saw with the A-levels, it looks as though the kids will do very well. 45% of A-level results were either A or A-star. This is going to have to be looked at for next year, isn't it? Because you can't just have, half of kids getting A and A stars. How do you then differentiate between them going forward? Is that something that's going to have to be considered for next year?
Yes, this is an exceptional year designed to make sure that despite the pandemic and despite the fact that we had to cancel exams because it wouldn't have been fair for young people to sit exams when they've had such different experiences of COVID, the different levels of self-isolation and so on. So the teacher-assessed grade system is the best alternative to making sure they can go on to the next phase of their education or their careers.
Question, though, Minister.
But we have already...
With respect, Minister, that's not my question. My question is, not this year, next year. You're going to have to refresh the grading system for next year, aren't you?
Yeah, so we've already announced the adjustments to the exams. We expect all young people to be taking exams in 2022, but we'll be making adjustments to those exams to reflect the fact that this cohort will have had disruption to their education as well. And the regulator Ofqual will be saying more about the grading standard that will be used for those exams in the autumn term.
OK, so just to clarify, you will be refreshing the grading system for next year?
No, what I said was we'll be talking about what the grading standard will be for the 2022 exams. We are looking also in the longer term about how to make sure that we get back to the system we had before the pandemic broke, where we had year-on-year no grade inflation, and we want to get back to that system in the longer run. But we have to make sure when we do that we are fair between different cohorts, the ones that took their exams in 2020 and 2021, and the students that are taking their exams in the future. It's fairness that lies at the heart of any decisions about grading. These are very difficult decisions to make, and we will be doing so in conjunction with the regulator, with the exam boards, and indeed with teachers and parents and students up and down the country before we come to firm decisions. But the issue about the grading system is the longer term.
I'm sorry, we only have a limited amount of time, Minister, as you know, and I've allowed you very fulsome answers to the first two questions. You're talking about being fair. Private school pupils' grades far higher than those from less privileged backgrounds. You've been Schools Minister since 2010. Is it demoralising for you, with all the work that you've done, to close that attainment gap, to then see what's happening?
Well, we have closed the attainment gap since 2010 by 13% in primary schools and by 9% in secondary schools up to the beginning of the pandemic. Independent schools are academically selective by and large, and they always do get the higher share of top grades. And this year, what we've seen is that right across the school system, whatever kind of school the young person goes to, they have seen an increase in those top grades. And if you look at the relative change in those top grades, independent schools have gone up by about 15%, comprehensives have gone up by about 18%. So those top students are performing better right across the board, whatever type of school they go to. But we are determined as a government, we have been since 2010 to close that attainment gap. And that's what all our reforms have been about. The reforms to reading, the reforms to how you teach maths, the changes to the curriculum in secondary school, the changes to the GCSEs and A-levels have all been about making sure that every young person, regardless of their background, gets the best possible education.
OK, Minister, university students, do you agree with your boss, who was on the show earlier on in the week, that they should receive a refund if online learning continues?
Well, what we said is that there are no COVID reasons now for students not to receive face-to-face education. These are matters ultimately for universities, but there's certainly no COVID reason why students cannot receive face-to-face education. The Office for Students, the regulator, does monitor very closely the quality of education that students are receiving in our universities. And if students have complaints, they should, of course, complain to the university and through the complaints process.
OK, my question was, should they receive a refund? Your boss thinks they should. Do you agree with him?
Well, there can be. There are students who have gone through that complaints procedure who have then received compensation from the university. But these are ultimately matters for the university, and we have a very powerful regulator that Gavin referred to.
I understand all that. I'm asking your opinion. Do you agree with your boss that kids who cannot have face-to-face learning should get a refund?
As I've said, there is a procedure by which they can get compensation, and they need to go through the complaints procedure if the quality of education that they are receiving isn't of the standard that is required by the regulator.
OK, so if that's the case, and lots of them do that, who's going to pay for the shortfall?
Well, that will be the university sector. If they're not providing the quality of education that the regulator requires of them, then, of course, the university themselves will have to fund any compensation payments made to those students. But I am confident that we do have very high-quality education in our universities. We have a world-leading university sector in this country, of which we can be proud. They have responded extremely well to increasing numbers of students going to university. We've seen a 5% increase last year, another 5% increase in places this year. We have record numbers of young people going to university and record numbers of young people from disadvantaged backgrounds going to university. So I think we can be proud of our university sector and what they're doing for young people and what they're doing for our country. OK, to that end, do you agree that universities should be paying compensation for kids to defer for 12 months, like Exeter University is offering 10 grand for some kids to defer for a year? Well, every year there are a number of students who do, a small number of students who defer, and that's the same this year. At universities, we've been working very closely with the universities. You're not answering any of my questions this morning. Do you think that universities should pay students to defer for a year? Yes, they can do if they wish to, but these things are always optional for students. Any student that achieves the grades... That's all I needed on that one. I just want to ask you about your boss now. Keir Starmer has called for him to be sacked. Why do you think he should keep his job? Because he's a very effective education secretary. I've worked with Gavin Williamson for the last 2 years, and he is driven to make sure that no student will suffer long-term damage to their prospect as a consequence of the pandemic. He's driven to continue the reform programme in our education system, where we're seeing, up until COVID, we saw that attainment gap close in primary school and in secondary school, and he's driven to do more to make sure we continue to drive up standards in our education system so that background does not matter in terms of the opportunities available for young people. OK, talk to me about what's going on in Berlin and a British man arrested for spying. Tobias Ellwood, MP, suggesting we need to review the status of private security personnel. Do you agree? Well, I don't feel I'm able to talk about this issue. This is now subject to the government this morning. A police investigation. You're here representing the government this morning? Yes, I am. And because this is a matter of police investigation, it would not be appropriate for any minister to come on your programme and to discuss this particular issue. OK, I wonder if you think that you have a view on the fact that we don't have a security minister. That post has been open for a month. We should be filling that, shouldn't we, given stuff like this is happening? Well, again, this is the matter for the Prime Minister, and he makes these appointments, and I'm sure that these things will happen in due course.
OK, I'm going to ask you about the Gurkhas then. Has anyone from the government spoken with representatives from the Gurkhas that are on hunger strike just on Whitehall there?
Well, we do take very seriously the issue of the pensions for Gurkhas, the Gurkhas pension scheme. We have increased it between 10 and 25% since March 2019, added another £25 million in terms of providing health for Gurkhas in Nepal. Ministers are, of course, in touch with and will be in touch with those people that are concerned about the pensions for Gurkhas. And the Gurkhas are a very important part of the British Army, and we've always taken very seriously the welfare and the pensions of Gurkhas who've served in our armed forces.
Just to clarify, you said that ministers had been in touch with them, yeah?
Well, I'm not entirely sure who's met who, but I do know that we are always keen to talk to people who are concerned about the welfare of our Gurkha regiment and the pensions arrangements for those soldiers. And as I've said, we have increased the Gurkhas pension scheme in March 2019 to make sure that we are providing pensions for those Gurkhas who've served so well in our armed forces.
Indeed so. 250 million quid for a boat for ministers to travel around the world. That's what the Prime Minister is proposing, while these veterans are starving themselves to death on the streets of Whitehall. The optics are not good, are they? Whatever the rights and wrongs, the government has to do something about this.
And that will be a matter for the MOD. In terms of wanting to sell Britain abroad, it is important. We are a global trading nation, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything to sell British business abroad. And that's the purpose of the kind of projects that you're talking about, making sure that we are getting our businesses exporting around the world as we having left the European Union. And that is what global Britain is all about.
OK. Quick thought before I let you go. Your boss couldn't remember his A-level grades when he was asked earlier on in the week. Can you remember yours?
I can, yes. Yes, I can remember them, yes.
Go on, tell me.
Well, I got four grade A's, and I was able to go on to the university that I hoped to go to. And Gavin also was able to go to the university that he wanted to go to, and he was very pleased by his results.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time.